people think of a strong brand, they think of some of the big names, and whether it's retail or technology, you could think of every category we touch. There's some pretty iconic and strong brands out there. In your mind, what constitutes that strong brand?
Ultimately, it's got to evoke some sort of feeling or emotion. Powerful brands, are the embodiment of some of their customers.
Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. People often, the refrain is that you never like talking about yourself, or, people ask you some internal looking questions that make you look, at yourself and talk about who you are, what you do, those sorts of things. Well, we're going to try to do that in the form of an entire podcast today with our brand and strategy and communications team here on this episode of the Independent Thinking Podcast, because we've got our VP of brand and strategy, Mr. Rob White, joining us for something we've joked about for a long time, but doing a Dos Rabos podcast. And we got a lot to dive into. The world of branding is something that, honestly, personally, never thought about from a communication standpoint. But when Rob joined the team a couple of years ago, it opened up the way we kind of think and operate as a communications and brand team. And this past year especially, or the previous 12 months, we've had a couple of opportunities to play a really deep role in and important role in the rebranding and launch of certain brands here within Nationwide Marketing Group, with the rebrand of Oasis and the launch of Ellipsis. And it's a really cool opportunity to watch the work that you do and the way you think about a brand and help build a brand or relaunch a brand come to life. And, from the teams themselves that we were working with to just the different exercises we went through to build a story and talk about the services and benefits. It's a cool opportunity to learn about yourself while also rebranding yourself or launching a new brand. So we dive into that with Rob and think about the world of branding for a retailer as well, why it's important, what a strong brand looks like, how it can impact, your business as well as the customers that you're trying to attract to your store. And what better time than now? There really is, as we come to find out, there's really no bad time to be working on your brand, but especially with the market the way it is and some of those challenges. And now is probably the best time that you could be working on your brand and working to build those connections with your customer and tell that proper story about who you are as a business. So much to dive into. And for as much as we say, it's tough to talk about oneself or what you do in your work, really cool opportunity to do so. So appreciate Rob doing that. But let's jump into it. This is Rob White, our VP of Brand and Strategy here at Nationwide Marketing Group on the Independent Thinking Podcast. All right, we are back on the Independent Thinking Podcast, and we couldn't officially rename it, but the Dos Rabos. Are we allowed to say that? Is that a thing? Can we do that? Is that okay?
I don't think it's trademarked. It might be.
No, we can, right?
Somebody's idea, but yeah.
Well, they didn't, an old podcast that used to exist in this space, but the Dos Rabos podcast, we were going to have it in Cabo. So, it would have, right now, this time of year would have been great, to be in a warm climate. Oh, man. But Mr. Rob White, appreciate you jumping on, our VP of Brand and Strategy here at Nationwide Marketing Group. First time I've had someone from our team, I think, on the podcast to talk. So this is different. It's like usually I'm like introducing the people and being like, well, I want to learn all about you. I feel like I know about you, but our audience doesn't know about you too, So some they may know the name, obviously familiar with you in this space, but I'll give you that opportunity, right? Kick us off and tell us a little bit about who you are, your background and path to Nationwide.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's excited to be on the pod. I'm excited to be on the podcast. And obviously excited to be the first one. I don't know if that was done because like you felt like
I've been avoiding this.
So for me, I mean, geez, where to start? I grew up in a very small town, middle of nowhere, Illinois. And you don't grow up in a small town without really developing the passion for the people, the community, local businesses, right? And so, I left my small town, joined the Army, eventually went to college. After grad school, I found my way to Whirlpool Corporation. So obviously that's where I cut my teeth into this industry, really just cut my teeth into, corporate America, the brand world, marketing world. I was fortunate enough to be in a rotational program. So I did a little bit of everything there, from category management, brand management, product development, sales, marketing, product marketing. I eventually found my way to Nationwide. I was working on the shopper marketing team, handled the retail business for Whirlpool as well as the builder business. And obviously on the retail side of the business, worked with, everybody, AVB, Natum, Necco, and of course Nationwide. And, very fortunate enough 3 years ago, to come over here to be part of the Nationwide team. And it really gets me one step closer to those local businesses that, I really hold near and dear to my heart.
Oh, that's awesome. What is it? You mentioned going through all those different areas of the Whirlpool business. What about branding stuck? Like, what made that stick for you, and kind of had it be the thing you wanted to put your passion behind?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, I love the connection to the consumer, right? And, in the branding world, right, we're really professional storytellers, and you're supposed to translate your products and services into a message that resonates with the consumers. And then, ultimately the goal is to make the consumers happy, make consumers, validate their choice, make so that they loved your product, love the interaction, and, want to continue and make loyal advocates and come back. And so, you don't really get that in the product world. You don't really get that in the sales world. On the branding world, you can see these ideas come to life, and you can see it kind of play out in market. So that's what really, kind of I gravitated towards, to be part of the team, kind of telling the story and trying to, create messages that are memorable.
Yeah, that kind of, I feel like starts to answer what, the follow-up is, and kind of giving that overview on what branding is. Like, what if someone asked you, they came up to you and, just want to know, like, tell me what branding is, an overview on the branding world. I feel like a lot of people, they see branding, the first thing that comes to mind is a logo, right? So, or that initial touch point, that presentation of a brand. So how would you kind of describe the hidden parts of this business?
Yeah, a logo is certainly part of it, but it's not the whole story, right? And I think, your brand is arguably one of your most important assets. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the brand guy, but
Yeah.
it gives your business, your product, it gives your brand or your organization really an identity or a personality. It's kind of it's the foundation that you really, it's that foundation with your consumers, right? It tells them who you are, what you stand for, and what are your values. I think someone, and I don't know who coined the phrase or the quote, but it's really stuck out to me. Your brand, it represents the promise to your customers, but also to yourself.
No, I love that. And it kind of gets to the work we've been doing, right? Over the past couple of years internally, and I know with members as well. Before we dive into that a little bit deeper, what, if, there's some iconic ones out there, right? Like, people think of a strong brand, they think of some of the big names, and whether it's retail or technology, you could think of every category we touch. There's some pretty iconic and strong brands out there. There's one behind you. I feel like he's almost a brand, right? If you're watching the video version of this, Mr. Ali. But what, in your mind, what constitutes that strong brand?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, I think ultimately it's got to evoke some sort of feeling or emotion. When consumers look at a brand, there's an old saying, and I think it's more in the academic world, but the brand organization has kind of stole it. Like, your brand can either be a window or a mirror. Have you heard this concept?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So like for a mirror, right? Consumers
Yeah,
look at your brand, they see themselves,
right.
see a reflection of their core beliefs, who they are, and they make this immediate connection with you, right? And so powerful brands, are the embodiment of some of their customers, right? On the flip side of that, the analogy of the brand could be a window. windows, you gaze out, you kind of see an aspiration, or you see what you aspire to be, you see some sort of like bigger picture or a different way of doing something. And so, consumers of brands kind of look at these, aspirational luxury brands, and they're like, oh man, I want to be a part of that. Or they look at a B2B organization like Nationwide of like, oh man, some of my peers that are utilizing some of these services, like they are who we want to be. Like we certainly, have members that are like, can learn from our other membership. And so, brand could be a window where you look at and see, oh man, I need to be a part of that, because that will make my organization better. And, from a consumer standpoint, same thing. Oh, if I buy this golf ball, I can be better. If I buy this car, I can, fit in. Like it's an aspirational side.
Yeah, it was like those Adidas stripes on the shoes that, if I wore them, I ran faster, right?
Mhm.
That's what it's all about. Well, more recently, just I think too, so one of the first thing that comes to mind, the way you're talking, is like an Apple, right? Apple as a brand, and is it possible to do both? Like, can a brand evoke sort of that mirror and be a window, like into what you want to be as opposed to who you are?
Yeah, I certainly think so. And a lot of that, right? Anytime you have a brand with multiple different products, services, and solutions, right? You can have some of the core brand promise, the core fundamentals of the brand, you see yourself in, but then the output of some of the products and services can be aspirational to a piece, right? Now, nobody sits down in a brand strategy and says, oh, do we want to be a mirror? Do we want to be a window? Those are just, it was an interesting analogy that I've heard on how to look at a brand. I think either way, whether you're a window or a mirror, ultimately in either of those scenarios, you're trying to make an emotional connection with the member, or, members for us, but
Right.
emotional connection with the shopper, which is very important. And we know that the more significant the decision is on the customer, like, a financial decision or, whatever that is, the more important that decision is, the more important that emotional connection is. And the more the customer wants to know about you and your brand to make sure that they, are validated by choosing you.
Right. Oh, and it brings up an interesting point. Like, a brand can come to life in so many ways. You mentioned some of the thing, like the messaging, obviously the look and presentation, commercials, website. Like, there's so many aspects of a brand, and it's kind of interesting to see sort of, again, just for, I think, my own sake and interest in tech, it's like an Apple, and kind of watching that evolve too, right? Like a brand is constantly evolving, and seeing a company like that, where, that those super early days, and the Steve Jobs movies out there, I think, do a really cool job of displaying that, right? Like, going from a company of essentially nerds, right? Like a bunch of tech nerds, building computers in a garage, to, that 1980, that iconic commercial, of sort of building that brand, and then watching sort of what it's become. And it's like an aspirational piece. It's a community. It sort of builds that sense. And it's
Yeah,
unique.
Apple, and I mean, we can.
One example, right? But yeah,
I'm a Google guy.
yeah, I know.
I do appreciate Apple, and Apple is a very strong brand, and I think what makes Apple, one of the strongest brands is the authenticity, right? They show up authentic every single time, and I think, you asked earlier what makes a strong brand. For me, authenticity is that. And you can't make a living out of selling lies, right? It could work for a little bit. It could work for one product. Like if Apple launched their first phone and it was horrible, like consumers now want to go out and find other things, right?
Right.
So once a consumer purchases your product or uses your service, for them, the question's fairly simple. Like, did the expectations and the experience that I had going into it, did it match, right? And if it doesn't match, like, you're done, right? Like, it's hard to rebuild that trust. It's hard to go back and find those shoppers again and have them give you another chance. On the other hand, if it matches, right, the expectations I had on, the first Apple product, or the expectations I had on, different golf club, if it matches, you validate that, like, hey, this was a good choice. You should have bought from us, and you start building that trust. And if you can find ways to surprise and delight them and kind of deliver over and above, you start to really create those loyalty and advocates. And that's what strong brands do really, really well. And they do it
Yeah.
day in, day out.
Oh, that's awesome. And enough about Apple too. And as an Apple fanboy, it's we can cut it there because we got a lot to talk about some of the work we've done as well. That I think is it's exciting to kind of have been a part of and see things come to life. I'm so used to using words to tell a story and whatnot, but to never thought about it from like that branding perspective. So this past year has been, I think, really cool, and to be able to see that come to life in various forms. And one way, the CI team, for those that don't know, our custom integration brands here at Nationwide, we got a new one. We've got a recently rebranded one and another one out there that, we're trying to support as well. So talk about that, like the impact of that is sort of what we've done. I'll let you give kind of the overview at first if you want, and then we can kind of dive into just sort of the impact that it's had and what it means going forward.
Yeah, sure. So it's been a very exciting time. Usually, in I think back in my 12 and a half, 13-year brand career at Whirlpool, big consumer company, lots of product development. There's very, very few times, I think too, that like we launched a new brand, like new to the world brand, right? You launch products all the time, but so it's exciting in the brand world when you get to launch new brands and new go to market and kind of start from scratch. And so, it's been an exciting time as you mentioned the last, year. And so with, migrating HTS into Oasis, you get to go a complete new brand refresh. You get to, kind of revisit the value proposition that you provide to the members, and you get to, go through with logos, designs, creative, and really start the foundation to tell those stories. And a brand refresh is one thing, but launching a brand from start to finish and building it from scratch is another. And so that's what we've done with Ellipsis, the commercial side of the integration. And it's great working with Andy Orozco and Chris on that team, and really starting from scratch and saying, hey, what do we want to deliver for the consumers? What do we want to deliver for your main target audience? And then you start to build these messages, you start to build the pillars, you start to then transition that and bring it to life, and it's super exciting. You don't get to do it very often, so
no, and I mean,
kind of geek out on
it. Well, it's cool too because the teams did, right? Like they got all into it, and watch how the excited Hank gets and Chris gets as they see these logos and potential names come together, and just the different treatments of colors. It's kind of giving them the opportunity to get in the weeds with it as well, because it's important to them. It's like their baby, right? They're watching it come to life, and they know the importance of it. And some days are maybe a little more challenging for them than others with certain aspects of it, but when they see that finished product and kind of what they're able to do with it today, a few months out from having the launch or having the refresh, it's kind of validation, right? That they did it right, that they went through a process and saw it all come together. And now it's like you're letting it leave the nest and fly.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But we'll talk about the impact of it, right? Like we see the impact internally on like what they're able to do, but for the members out there, HTSN to Oasis might be a name to them, but what at the end of the day is really the impact that they're able to see or sort of get out of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Nationwide Marketing Group has always been a member focused company, right? Our promise is helping our members thrive on their own terms. All of our members have all different recipes for success, and there might be a common ingredient here and there, but as an organization, we need to meet them where they're at with a solution that helps their business. And so all of our brands, either organizations like Oasis or Ellipsis or Nationwide, or our branded products like Prime Metrics, come from a specific need of the membership. And so the easy question of, how does it help our members? Like that should be pretty clear. Like they have a need, we have to find a solution that helps them. But obviously, it's not that simple, because our members wear many, many hats, as within the business, kind of often strapped for time. So as we build out these brands and the messaging, we could have the greatest product in the world, and Chris and Hank and the teams, they could have everything there. But if we can't connect with, this target audience quickly and talk about what is our brand about, what should it matter to them, how would things be different with an Oasis or Ellipsis versus where they're at today, and what they can expect to gain from it. Like, if we can't nail that, like, we're in trouble. And so the impact that the brand has is like, we got to find a way to do that. We got to quickly connect with, that target audience at the right time, articulate our value equation in the words that a member would, like, quickly understand and gravitate towards. And really it comes down for our members and like a, human resource constraint time is like, can they benefit from it by us helping them save time, money, or some sort of, providing margin or revenue growth.
Right.
And so, like, you can solve that for our member, but we also have to solve it for our internal sales team, right? That's another piece of this. You got to arm them with these messages at the right time so they can go out and carry the torch and sell it and do the work, right? I mean, you said kind of lets the bird fly out of the nest, but we have to stay close to them on the messaging and communication strategy. So we're learning both ways, right? It's a kind of a two-sided funnel. As they have an incredibly difficult job, and thankfully they're the absolute best in the industry. Like, our sales team, whether it's Nationwide, Ellipsis, Oasis, Ozione, like, absolute best in the industry. And I say that, coming from my 12 years at Whirlpool, dealing with all of the, the retail business, and, they're great, but they also have 100+ solutions that they got to quickly map. What can Nationwide solve versus what this member specific needs, and then understand enough to carry that forward. And so that's where, from your side, the comm side, and the message strategy, and, driving and, A/B testing messages is where, we really kind of make our hay and continue to build this, after the bird's flying out of the nest.
Well, it comes home too, right? It needs to come home and get that food. But no, it also goes to show too that messages can evolve over time. So even though it's those were projects that we saw through to completion, it's not a set it and forget it. Like, these brands are constantly evolving, needs are constantly evolving. So talk about that a little bit too. Like, what it's like to because I think, even looking internally at the rest of Nationwide, beyond just the CI side of things, we know there's always work going on the branding side and kind of what's happening. So that constant evaluation, like, what's that like to reevaluate sort of where we are from the branding side of things to make sure we're going to market with that right message?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good time to have this introspective look and, work on your brand. Times certainly change, customer behavior changes, and technology changes, sometimes super quick. And so you always have to map out, from a brand standpoint, like, who are we and what do we do? And is that still relevant today? As we, acquire businesses, or you develop new products, you got to make sure that, the products that you're developing kind of marry up to the broader organization and what we stand for. And, that's true no matter what. And, brands are an important piece of that all the time, but, in today's market, it's even more important, as things get competitive. The trust relationship and the emotions and that connection that you make between your products and services and your brand with what they need is super, it's more important in a competitive time than it is, say when times are great and consumer confidence is up.
Yeah. And it kind of, I think meshes, with what we've said in the past about, marketing, right? From a branding and marketing, or they kind of go hand in hand, right? That just because I know things were easy coming out of COVID, right? Like, every foot traffic was up, sales skyrocketed. And it was like, during those times, we were also sending that message to our members, right? Don't forget about your market. Like, there's going to be a time where it's going to either slow down or, it'll become more challenging than it seems like it is today. And I think it's kind of that constant ebb and flow of this industry, right? The retail industry. So not an uncommon refrain for a retailer to hear, but one that they need to hear, because you got to keep working on it, because you can't, rest on your laurels, every other cliche that's out there along those lines, right?
Yeah. So I love that. Let's talk about that a little more. Like, let's rewind to COVID. Not that anybody wants to relive COVID, but we had, most of our categories that we sell are long lead item times, refrigerator you buy every 7 years, bed, furniture, et cetera. And so you had an entire customer base that couldn't travel. They're sitting on cash. They're spending more times at their homes, putting more wear and tear on the things in their homes. And, hey, well, if I got to be home every day, let me, fix my house, do a remodel, like buy new things. And so consumer demand for products in the home were at extraordinary levels, right? At the same time, what was happening to supply?
Right.
It was way
absolutely
down.
crushed.
COVID closures at factories, people weren't working. They were taking, government handouts to sit at home. There were chip shortages, people shortages. I mean, it was wild. And so you had like demand way up, supply was way down. If you were fortunate to be sitting on inventory, you could sell it almost whatever price you wanted. And you really didn't have to market very hard other than like, hey, it's in stock, right? Because consumers didn't have a choice. It was like, I got to go buy this. I'm going to buy it wherever I can get it.
Right.
Now, fast forward today, like the pendulum's swinging in the other direction and supply's coming back, but, demand is now slowing down and, demand's down, supply's up, consumers have choice, right? And now they have choice and they have these economic pressures. And going back to, what we said earlier, like when there's choice and, economic pressures, like it's more significant, the impact of what they're buying. And then that means the emotional side of the connection between the product, service, or the brand is more important as part of that consumer journey. And so if they can find the product at multiple locations, but you've established this emotional connection with them, they see a reflection of themselves in you, they want to support local, they want to aspire to have a product service that you have, like they're more likely to purchase from you. So it kind of comes full cycle. And when competition's increased, like so is the importance of meeting those expectations and surprising and delighting them. And therefore, like your brand's more important today than it potentially could have been a couple of years ago when consumers didn't have that choice.
No, that's awesome. And it just again raises the importance of this space and kind of the work of a brand team, right? So to be able to develop that connection and I think so much of what we talk when we talk to independent retailers and our members, it is those connections. Like I feel like we're talking about branding without really having talked about branding in the past. Like having that, being that go-to resource. There's a reason you're that go-to resource. It's because of a relationship you developed, but that relationship you've developed had to start somewhere, and it comes with that person meeting your brand. And again, another way it comes to life, the individual, you represent that brand, yes. Right? So again, just another layer to kind of what the brand really entails.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Talked earlier, like your brand, it says who you are, but also, your employees. And, for our membership, their first touch point often, to our brand is our sales team. And, so it's very important for them, to be an embodiment of, the brand and the organization that they're part of. And again, like they do a phenomenal job out in the field carrying that torch, both, from a brand standpoint, from a culture standpoint, but also from like a industry knowledge of product, services, and solutions, and what our brand can help our members do, really. Because, we're like, the members are the hero in the story. Like we're just here to help and support. And, like I said, launch products that meet a need that they have, right. And leverage our, scale and leverage the fact that we can look across, our entire membership and find, solutions that might work for like size or like-minded retailers in the organization. And we couldn't do that without our sales team.
No, they are incredible. They got a lot to, go out there. You said it, so many different areas. So to be able to have sort of a refined message that they can, go to one of our members with, or understand what that member's needs are, and then turn it around and look internal. They got a tough job, they really do, but they do it well. So this was awesome. A fun, opportunity to dive into, we dive into it every day, but to kind of let other people dive into what we're doing and watch it come to life in the form of the first ever Dos Rabos podcast. Next time we will go to Cabo.
I love it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey man, this was
When we get the residuals, we're gonna go to Cabo.
get some sponsorships. We got some sponsorship dollars, I'm sure, somewhere out there floating that we could get us a chartered flight to Cabo. Oh man, no, this was cool. So I appreciate the time, and we'll certainly. I feel like we could slice up branding a whole bunch more than we already did. So
yeah, happy to go down the rabbit holes of the branding world. I love it. It's just excited that other people can geek out with me.
let's do it. All right. And thanks again to Rob, again, taking the time and being able to sit down and chat with us about the work that we're doing as a brand and communications team, and the importance of building that strong brand, right? Something that I think might get overlooked by a lot of people who just take their brand. They might not think about it from that brand perspective, but take who they are as a brand for granted, and sort of the work that can really go behind making being purposeful about your brand. So an awesome opportunity to dive into that and share that story. So we appreciate it. Appreciate Rob doing that. And as always, appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast. And we'll catch you next time.